Well, I'm glad you asked for my opinion, because that is purely what it will be. But was the third one NIV? In the NIV. Well, that one is so easy that I'll just draw a box and say that we're talking about two completely different, it's like apples and oranges. This would be a Western manuscript or Byzantine or majority. That's the three ways that this majority manuscript family, the King James, New King James. In fact, the National Geographic just, don't forget your question, you three. Wait a minute. That is more than two, Pat. 1, 2, 3. Okay, just a second. I'll come right back to you, but I don't want to forget what I was saying. The National Geographic just ran a special on this very question. Any of you that get the National Geographic, that was the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. They did a 500th anniversary or the 400th anniversary of the King James, and they did this huge spreadsheet and showed exactly everything I'm telling you. This is the Eastern manuscript. It's also known as the critical text, and it's also known as the minority text. And this one was actually started in the times the 19th century. They assembled this one from all of the archaeological digs that they started finding, all these remnants of manuscripts. This one basically is the family of it is what Luther used when he did his translation of the Bible. This is what Wycliffe used. This is what, all those early manuscripts, and it's also what became known as the received text or the Textus Receptus. Basically, doctrinally, the only difference between the two manuscripts, I'm not talking about the translations because there is a big difference between them, but between these manuscripts family is the Western text, the Byzantine, the majority. It's interesting, probably 90% of all sermons that quoted the Bible from the 2nd century through about the 6th century, 90% of all the sermons. Now see, pastors, you know how this morning I read 4 verses, but a lot of times we'll read a whole chapter. Pastors, as they preach, would quote inside their sermons text. And what's interesting is that 90% approximately of all the printed sermons of what is called the post-apostolic fathers, the pastors from after the time of the apostles, the 2nd century through the Byzantine church era in the 6th century, quoted from this one. And about 10% of them quoted from this one, which is maybe 15%. So it's fascinating that the church history up through the 19th century primarily had this family of manuscripts. This family of manuscripts is shorter. They're from desert areas. They're older. That's the key, why people like them. They're older, but they're not older because they're closer to the original. They're older because they didn't rot in the deserts. And these are newer because they were in Europe and areas where it rains and where bugs and mice and everything ruin stuff. So the King James, New King James is based on the Western Byzantine majority text. The NIV, though, is a translation, and that is a whole different realm. It's not a literal translation. So we'll go like that. It's not a literal translation. These are. So the danger with the NIV is that it has started drifting away from the premise of a literal translation. And these little blocks here are Greek words. And each, in a literal translation, you put an English word to stand above each Greek word. So that's this side. But the NIV, they go like this, and they go, we'll put this word here, and we'll put a word here that's not, it's kind of close, and then we'll put a literal one above. And so it's called dynamic, and no longer are the words of the text. It's called a dynamic equivalence translation, which means it's close, but it's not anchored to the word. And so the Today's Living, the NIV, all the T and everything else NIVs are all this side of the non-literal. So I would always stay far away from a non-literal for constant doctrinal Bible study. There's nothing wrong with reading them. You can read the Living Bible. But if you're going to study doctrine, you need to stick to a literal, word-for-word translation of the Bible, not one of the new, modern, like Eugene Peterson, NIV, and all that stuff, that is no longer tied directly to the Greek text. So, did I say enough? Good.